I did not know you had a blazer.
I have many blazers.
Well done.
I have many, many blazers.
You look so thin.
I look thin?
You look thin.
Oh,
Yeah.
new haircut today. Maybe
Is that
that's
what it is? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Welcome to the pre-show.
Welcome to the pre-show.
So that being said, do we need to change the name of our podcast? So instead of calling it Welcome to the Music, we call it Welcome to the Pre-Show? Or should we have two podcasts?
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly expected to get on here and you're going to want to talk about Neil Young.
We are going to talk.
And you want to talk about Damon Albarn and Taylor Swift's little spat.
We are going to talk.
Not whether we're going to change the name of our podcast.
No, that is true. So, anti-vaxxers, Eric Clapton and Van Morrison, have a song called The Rebels. And they ask in their song, where have all the rebels gone? Well, I bring to you.
You bring to me.
This man. This one.
Yeah.
Neil Young. I bring to you Neil Young. That man has been rebelling against the machine since he started playing music. Yes. And he does not give a flying fidoo.
You pulling out a Bobcat McCowan reference, but go ahead.
He doesn't care. He follows his own muse when it comes to music.
Yep.
He has his beliefs.
Yep.
He doesn't check the temperature of what his beliefs mean. You know, he's not saying, okay, is this the right thing to say? Is it the wrong thing to say? Is it politically correct or incorrect? He stands by his beliefs. It's in his music. It's in the decisions he makes about what he does. And he follows through on it. And so what are we talking about? I don't know if only people who follow music would know this story or not, but Gregg, yesterday evening, my heart skipped a beat. I was on Twitter and I quickly glanced over to trending topics, and Neil Young was trending. And I'm like, there's no reason for Neil Young to trend.
Not his birthday.
It's not November. Yes, he just put out a new album and a new documentary that you can find on YouTube. But that documentary is not going to win any awards. Why is he trending? And so there was a sigh of relief when he was just railing against the machine.
Yeah.
So here's what he did. On his website, neilyoungarchives.com, he put up a letter and he asked or demanded Spotify to remove his music. The reason being that Spotify has an exclusive agreement with Joe Rogan and his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. Probably one of the top 3 podcasts in the English-speaking world. Tens of millions of listeners, streamers, downloaders, however you want to call it. And Joe Rogan is a anti-vaxxer.
Who shares misinformation.
Yes. It's not, you can be an anti-vaxxer, not share misinformation. He is both. Yes, that is correct. He shares a lot of misinformation, wrong information, and just spout, just puts it out there. And so he has a lot of influence. Neil Young might be a two-time Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. Might be one of the most prolific songwriters of our time. Might be one of the top guitarists of all time. But he doesn't, when it comes to mass popularity today, doesn't hold a candle to the popularity of a Joe Rogan. And so Neil Young is basically saying to Spotify, remove me from your platform. Now, there's a number of things that come right into play. Number one, Neil Young couldn't care less if he's removed from Spotify. I could care less. And he knows that. He knows that if Spotify had to remove him, he would. But on the other side, Greg, we talked about this last year. Neil Young and many of these artists of his generation no longer own their catalog. In fact, Neil Young last year sold 50% of his catalog to Hypnosis. And so he just doesn't have to ask his record label. He also has to ask these Hypnosis fellas, to say, hey, if it's okay with you, please request.
And business partners like the money that comes in from the spins, I'm sure.
Sure, that's part of the deal, right? The deal was that Hypnosis took a look at his catalog and said, there's money to be made here.
Yeah.
And one of the channels they're going to make money from is going to be streaming. And so Spotify is one of those streaming giants that provides a decent amount of income, I'm sure, to Hypnosis and Neil Young.
Yep.
But it is so great to see someone like Neil Young stand up against a business or a system that he knows he's got no fighting chance against. And he also knows that if they go through with it, that's a loss of income, however large or small it may be, a loss of income to Neil Young. And not just that, but should things improve and he goes on tour, there's a loss of a lot of data that I'm sure Spotify has and opportunities. You're probably familiar. You might be listening to several artists. And back in the before times, that artist goes on tour, you're getting an email, you're getting a notification from Spotify saying, hey, this artist that you really like listening to is going on tour. Here is a pre-sale code to use, or here's information. And so, there's lots of things that Neil Young is leaving on the table with this ask. Now, again, it's not just his call. There's business partners that he needs to persuade. But I saw that and I just standing ovation. Way to go, Uncle Neil.
And here I thought when you started with Eric Clapton, you were giving me a segue to a documentary that I want to talk about with our guest that's coming up, Richard Crouse.
And so let's go to our conversation with Richard Crouse.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Hey, I'm Richard Crouse, film critic for CTV. You can see me on the CTV News channel on CP24. Listen to my syndicated radio show on the iHeartRadio network. And right now, it's time to say welcome to the music.
Wait a second.
Time out.
Wait a second.
Where's
Hey, there
where's
you
the
go.
tie?
We
Where's
got dressed up for you.
We've got the glasses, the ties. I love it all, but there's a little pile of ties over there. I could put one on, but
It's all good. It's all good.
yeah.
Karim said to me today, messaged me, goes, should we wear ties? I'm like, that's a great idea. We'll get dressed.
yeah,
Normally we're wearing our rock shirts and whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
the glasses are we have to. We're at that age now, Richard, that the glasses stay.
Don't tell me about it.
Yeah.
No, they were on. I never take them off. There was a time when I would, if I didn't need them, I would take them off and lose them. And so I don't do that anymore. No, they just stay on.
Yeah. Pretty soon I'm going to be like my dad. I'll have strings attached to them and I'll just let them hang if I don't need to move them.
Yeah. I will never do that, but you feel free to do that.
You go.
Yeah. There's that. There's the minivan. What else are we not supposed to do?
Yeah.
I'm at the point though where I can't even take them off because I need them no matter what. Like I couldn't just take them off and walk around. So it doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. And, I have a bunch of different glasses that I wear. I kind of rotate through them and I don't want to take them off. They're kind of like, to me, they're like wearing my wedding ring or wearing a suit and tie. It's just part of the thing now.
Absolutely.
Thank you for putting up with my having to reschedule back in December. But
the only reason that I put up with that is because it has something to do with Campari, and
exactly.
Negronis are the king of cocktails. I like them. I like Campari, so I gave you a pass on that.
I do appreciate that, and once we get past COVID, we will circle back for a second discussion, and we will have some. Well, you and I have some Negronis. He'll have a Diet Coke.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Richard, right off the top. We are recording on January 25th. Yesterday, Neil Young, my musical icon, was trending on Twitter. And whenever someone of his ilk is trending on Twitter, my heart drops. But I saw why he was trending, and I was like, oh, yeah, way to go, Neil. Your thoughts on Neil Young and his public spat with Spotify?
Well, it's not the first time. A few years ago, he decided that he didn't want his music on Spotify, and he relented after a little while, and the music all went back up there. But people are kind of framing what's happening now as an ultimatum. Now, he does say in his letter, it's either me or Joe Rogan, Spotify, you choose. Well, Spotify just paid Joe Rogan $100 million to buy his podcast. So I think Neil Young knows which way this fight is going to go, one way or the other. But I don't really see it as an ultimatum. I see it as Neil Young not really caring if he's on Spotify or not. I mean, the reason he left last time is he didn't think that the sound quality was what he wanted it to be, and that hasn't changed. So there's one check. Neil Young probably makes, I don't know, $250 a year. I don't know how much they make, but they don't make a lot of money off Spotify. Taylor Swift will every now and again post a check that she gets from Spotify, and she's one of the biggest selling artists in the world, and it's for absurdly small amounts of money. So it's not like by saying, I'm going to leave Spotify, that he's leaving a big paycheck behind. What he's doing, I think, is just simply expressing, he's always been a political guy. He's expressing his displeasure. He believes in science. He believes that you should be double and triple and maybe quadruple vaccinated. And Joe Rogan, he thinks, is spreading misinformation about that and does not want his name alongside that. That to me is reasonable. That to me isn't censorship, because we all know which one of them is going to be shown the door. It's going to be Neil Young, one way or the other. And Neil Young opened that door and put one foot out of it by writing this letter. I say, good for Neil. Still, after all these years, 50 years or more of, is that 50? Yeah, 50 some odd years of making records. He's still putting his artistry where his mouth is. Maybe not his money so much in this case, but certainly his artistry.
Yeah, it was interesting when I found out about this on Twitter. I was actually looking for the I don't know if it's new, but the Van Morrison Eric Clapton song, "The Rebels." Both of them are, I don't know if they're well-known anti-vaxxers or anything like that, but they have their opinions that go that way. And in their song, they ask, "Where have the rebels gone?"
Yeah.
And it's like, dudes, right here. Look at what Neil's doing.
Yeah. I mean, Eric Clapton trends every now and again on Twitter. He'll release another statement about anti-vaxxing and that kind of thing. And there's always jokes about, like, during the 70s, he didn't seem mind, taking things from needles. So why now? So, Eric Clapton and Neil Young probably aren't going to be hanging out anytime soon.
No.
So from Eric Clapton now to what you talked about 70s, sort of jumping into our theme of film and music. One of my favorite documents, I'd love to get your view on it, is White Riot. I just like the backstory to it and everything, and then ending in that classic Clash performance.
Yeah.
I assume you've seen it, and
White Riot's great about rock against racism. It's one of those things that, the essentially the backstory is in the 1970s, Eric Clapton mouthed off on stage in support of Enoch Powell, who was a notorious white supremacist. White right supremacist. And Eric Clapton said something on stage, and I don't remember the quote, but it was like, "Hey, give him a chance. He's not a bad guy." There was more to it than that, but that was essentially it. And at the time, it got picked up in the newspapers. People wrote about it. He apologized, I think, and said, "Listen, I'm high all the time. Sometimes I say things I don't mean." But it stuck, and it started, or it was the little pebble that started the rolling down the hill and became a boulder called Rock Against Racism. And White Riot is a look at the beginnings of rock against racism and bands like The Clash, and that amazing concert footage they have at the end of the show, where these bands came out in blistering support of marginalized people, and an incredible performance at the end of that. But it has, for me, the stuff that you want in a great music doc. It's not just about the music. Great sports movies are never just about the sports. It's never about the big game at the end of the show, of the end of the movie. That's an element to it, but great sports movies are about big universal themes, about being an underdog or whatever it might be. Great music documentaries, to me, are the same thing. I want to see cool old footage, and I want to see interviews with people that were there, and I want all that, but I also want to get a real flavor of the time, and I want to understand why Rock Against Racism was a necessary thing. I want to understand why the Clash were so into it. I want to understand why British punk rock really embraced it. And that movie gives you all of that. It's like a newer film that will be in theaters a week or so from today, where we sit today on January 25th, called Polystyrene, I Am a Cliche. And she was the singer of X-Ray Specs, and a biracial woman in a world that was mostly made up of young, violent men. And it's an incredible story about a woman who battled racism and sexism and mental illness and came through the other end. But it's told from the point of view of her daughter. It sets up the time, the place, the personal relationships, and then you have this incredible music on top of it and footage I had never seen before. And you really feel, by the time the end credits roll, that you've gotten to know somebody, but you've gotten to, more importantly, or just as importantly, understand where they came from, and why their music resonated so much and still does today, decades after it was recorded.
Where is this being released on, Richard?
It'll be in theaters. It's already been out in the UK for a while. Polystyrene and X-Ray Specs only made one record in their heyday and then another record later on. But the one record is considered a classic. She's still kind of a well-known cult figure and icon over there. So the movie did well over there. Now it's coming out here in theaters and will be on VOD as of, I think it's February 4th or 11th.
That is awesome. I'm going to be writing down all of these, all of these movies. I don't think I have. I only have a small piece of paper, so
yeah.
you might hear me typing, Greg. So you might have to do some editing in this. Wow, there are so many music documentaries, and as soon as you were talking about White Riot, I go, damn, I don't know if I've seen. Other documentaries like that, where it's not just about the music, but it's about what's going on in the culture around it and the role that music plays in it. Gregg or Richard, what other music documentaries, would you think of that are in that same vein?
Well, for me, I think if you look at Lonely Boy, the Paul Anka doc, or maybe Don't Look Back, they're much different than White Riot or the Polystyrene film, but they give you an inside look at the ecosystem that was created around these stars, whether it was Paul Anka, who was a teeny bopper star at that moment, or Bob Dylan at his most kind of enigmatic in the late 60s. And it gives you a flavor of the time and the place, but also these are movies that were made, before publicists had taken over and limited time and marketing people were controlling images and that kind of thing. So you're getting a really raw, interesting look at these artists at a very specific time in their careers. And Don't Look Back, and in fact, really paints a nice picture of what was going on in and around Dylan's world that would have influenced him, at a time when he was arguably at his most prolific and creative.
I'm also thinking of, and I'm blanking on the name of the series. I think it was a Netflix series, and it was around the same time as White Riot. And it's the book Black Culture. And it's like a 5-part TV series, and it focused. This is great. I'm totally blanking out. Anyway, I'll try to remember it, but sure. Yeah, it basically focused on different sort of times and sort of the I think it's on Amazon, and it focused on like 1971 and would tell you about John Lennon moving to New York and sort of give you a flavor of the time and the place, and with loads of music as well. Could be. Anyway,
I can't remember what they were all called, but I know they went by years.
Yeah. Very good.
Let's sort of go back away from music documentaries just for a second. As Gregg and I were doing some research on topics, we could talk about so many of and I don't know if it was the same interview with Meatloaf, but that populated your Twitter feed, and it was all over on Google. You had an opportunity to speak with Meatloaf. He recently passed away a year ago. I guess his musical partner, we could say, Jim Steinman, had passed away. He's the genius that wrote Bat Out of Hell and Part 2. Back into Hell?
I think so. Yeah.
Your thoughts on I guess that partnership, Jim Steinman and Meatloaf?
Well, when you look at the music or listen to the music that Jim Steinman wrote, imagine anyone other than Meatloaf singing it. You needed someone who was bigger than life, who had this incredible 3 or 3.5 octave range in his voice. But you also needed someone who understand or who would be able to understand the theatrics of it all. And, there's one clip the day that Meatloaf passed away of my interview that kind of went viral of me asking Meatloaf, showing him the back of the Bat Out of Hell album with that famous picture of him, and he's sort of leaning back, and he's got a red scarf in his hand, and he's looking at the camera. And I said, "What would you say to this guy right now?"
Yeah,
and it was interesting. He said, when I'm on stage, I lose myself, and I had lost myself in the character of Meatloaf. And at that time that picture was taken, he said, I was Meatloaf 24 hours a day. I was Meatloaf in interviews, and I used to lie and I'd say outrageous things. And it's true. When I was doing the research for that interview, I do a lot of research for sit downs, because the 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 minutes, whatever it might be, of an interview that I do that you see is usually only a small portion of an hour or more interview that I'll do with these people. And so the Meatloaf interview was extensive. And so there was a lot of research to do. And I read some of these interviews. And when he told me, he goes, I used to lie all the time. And I'm like, well, yeah, you mean the story of you being the last person to shake John F. Kennedy's hand isn't really true? The story of you, picking up Charles Manson as a hitchhiker on the Sunset Strip, that's not true, please. So he told me about the character, but he said that was the character of Meatloaf. It was a larger than life character. And that's when the relationship between Jim Steinman's songs and music and Meatloaf just completely clicked into place for me, because you needed an actor. You needed someone to bring those songs to life in a way that there's lots of amazing singers out there. Yeah. But it's interesting that you never really hear covers of Paradise by the Dashboard Light. You don't hear a lot of Meatloaf covers. And those were big songs. You would expect that perhaps, they might have been covered a little bit more often than they have been. But I think that Meatloaf brought something so unique to him because he acted them. He was acting as this character. David Bowie had characters. The Thin White Duke and Ziggy Stardust, and there's other people that have dabbled their or put their toe in that water, I guess. But Meatloaf did it without telling anybody. He was just this big character, this larger than life character that overtook him, and he brought that passion and that theatricality to the songs, and that's what made the spark, I think, that made those records, so outstanding. Because when they didn't work together, the records were remarkably less successful. And, there was just something about that combination. It's Elton John and Bernie Taupin. There's just something about, the way that two people can work together, or Lennon and McCartney, whatever. There's a million Rodgers and Hart, whoever it might be. There's the one hand feeds the other in an interesting and artistic way.
Do you think Jim gets sort of the respect?
No, I think that Meatloaf was such a larger than life character that he gets all the attention. Jim Steinman's name is on the front of the Bat Out of Hell album. He was certainly celebrated and talked about, but Meatloaf was the star. Jim Steinman was the guy behind the scenes, and I suppose he gets respect songwriters. Sure. Todd Rundgren speaks very highly of him. Songwriters tend to, I think, but I think he's kind of polarizing. In some ways, people think that the bombastic thing that he brought to the kind of operatic style of music that he made. Some people dig it. I wore out the grooves on Bat Out of Hell several times over. I'm probably one of the reasons that record's one of the biggest selling records of all time, because I had it on vinyl at least twice, maybe 2 or 3 times, on CD, on cassette, on 8-track. I kept buying copies of it because every time the format changed, I'd buy a new one. So I liked it, but I talked to lots of people the week that Meatloaf died who told me, it wasn't for me. It was too bombastic. It was too big. It was too theatrical. I was like, I guess that's exactly what I liked about it. Yeah. When I was almost a preteen when that record came out. So for me, it's it worked.
I remember as a kid, maybe grade 4 or grade 5, seeing that that record in my cousin's apartment, and just the cover of it, I looked at that. I go, "Whoa, what kind of music are you listening to?"
Yeah.
The cover does not, for me, does not go with the music.
Oh, I think it does. Oh man,
That's
I
amazing.
think it does. Yeah, no, I think it does. It's over the top. It's a little bit silly. It's a motorcycle, just a totally rock and roll vehicle.
It was scary to me.
Well, I mean, I think that, the Meatloaf, the intensity and the passion that he brought to it was meant to kind of bowl you over a little bit. And, that record album certainly, caught a lot of people's eyes. So it worked in that sense.
Oh, for sure. Great music. Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
For sure. No, absolutely. So along that lines of Meatloaf, like now let's transition that over towards like Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'd like to talk about some of the musicals. Rocky Horror being an iconic thing. It's over the top. It's crazy. And what are some of your favorite musicals that?
I don't love musicals, but I will tell you, Rocky Horror Picture Show, I've probably seen more than almost any other movie because years ago here in Toronto, there was a theater called the Roxy that used to play it at midnight. And that was like a very long time ago. And you'd go after you had been out doing other things all night, you'd go to the Roxy. And it was where I first saw people dressed up and bringing toast to throw around the audience and that kind of thing. Everyone would run to the stage or to the screen and do the time warp. And it was just, an absolute hoot. Then it moved around to various theaters in town. And I've seen it on the screen at a lot of different theaters. I've seen people miming it in front of the screen along with the movie, dressed in costume. I saw it in London in about 1979, I think. And so, I've got a bit of a history with that movie, and I still like it. It's still a whole load of fun. The first live show that we went to see during one of those rare times in Toronto when you were actually able to do things because we've been locked down so tightly for the last couple of years. The first live theater that we saw was at a dinner theater. I've never been to a dinner theater before. It was uptown. We go to a dinner theater. We watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show on a tiny little stage behind plexiglass. And it was super duper fun. The audience was into it. People were happy to be out. They were in costume. They were interacting with the stage. It was, of course, during the time warp, you look around, everyone's doing the time warp. So, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has a real kind of place in my heart. Cabaret is a musical that, for me, I love. I've seen it on stage a number of times with Alan Cumming playing the MC. The movie is still great, although it's much different than the later Sam Mendes reinterpretation of the stage show. But the thing I think that I like about it is not only are the songs amazing, and like we were talking about earlier with rock documentaries, it so creates a sense of the time and the place, and things are changing. And then at the end, nothing works out for anybody. It's the bleakest ending maybe of a musical ever, although I'm sure I'm forgetting something. But it really isn't that joyful kind of, put a little bug in your bonnet on the way out of the theater. It doesn't work that way, but it's an incredible show. So both on film and on stage, both those shows, Cabaret and Rocky Horror Picture Show, have stayed with me for a very long time.
So here's a fun fact. If I'm not mistaken, Karim's wedding reception was at the Roxy, wasn't it? Didn't you the Allenby on Danforth?
Is that the one beside the Esso?
Yeah. It's now
now it's like a Circle K or something.
Tim Hortons now or something.
Yeah.
That was
your wedding reception.
Way to go, Greg. Right? Yes, that's where
why
I got
married.
You
and went, me next, go.
And it was cheap. I mean, I think it was 99-cent movies or something. And, super fun.
Yeah. Wow. So, speaking of musicals, I think in our family, our favorite movie, especially during Christmas time, we would watch it every year, would be Sound of Music. Right. Just a great, It's a great story, great, just wonderful music. And in fact, Edelweiss would be the song that my wife and I would sing to our son. To not that we sang very good, that we'd sing to him when he'd go to sleep.
See, that's not the movie I would have thought. Looking in the back there with the Neil Young stuff everywhere.
Yes.
Sound of Music does not strike me.
No.
That would not have been my first guess for you.
No.
I love Phantom of the Paradise. That's another great rock musical.
Yeah.
Venom of the Paradise is a movie that it was only a hit in two places: Paris, where it ran forever, and Winnipeg. And it ran for ages in Winnipeg. And still, I mean, the pandemic certainly has changed things. But they used to have like a convention every year, and like Paul Williams, who starred in the movie and wrote those songs like "Roll on Thunder, Shine on Light," and "The Days Are Long and the Nights Are Frightened," and all that stuff. He would show up, sign autographs, do that kind of thing. But yeah, the Phantom of the Paradise, the Brian De Palma movie, is a movie that has, I think, aged well for rock fans and for fans of rock musicals.
That's amazing. Let's take another weird swerve. Not too long ago was Radio Day, Richard, and you shared a photo from back in the day. Your first job at CKBW in Nova Scotia. What were you, a DJ? What were you doing?
I was a DJ. Well, I was a junior announcer, and so I was a DJ that played rock and roll music for part of the day on the weekends. I think Friday night for sure, I did a top 40 show, and I really buggered it up the first time that I did it because you had to play 40 songs in 4 hours or something like that. And everybody told me, just make sure you time it right. Make sure you time it right, and you leave time for the number one song, because at 10 o'clock, another station, the news would kick in, whether you wanted it to or not. It was just like bing, 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 here's the news. And so you had to time it so that your song would be fading up and you had just enough time to say, good night, here's the news. And so I'm fighting about this all night and trying to work it out. And I think that I've done such a great job. And I remember the song "Heartache Tonight" by the Eagles, and I threw that on, and you hear bong gunka bong, that drum part that opens it, and then bing, 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 and now the news.
Man.
And so I didn't get to play the number one song other than about 4 or 5 seconds of it. I didn't get to sign off. I didn't get to do any of that stuff. So I got better at it as time went on, but I also had to play a lot of country music. I think on Saturday nights, I played country music. I did an easy listening show that was kind of a late night show called Stardust, which was designed to put you to sleep. I read obituaries. I read the news when we had our own news broadcasts. And I did something called Swap Shop, where people could call in and say, I've got a crate of mason jars that I'm willing to trade for a bicycle tire. And then we try and get people calling in and arrange these trades, kind of like Kijiji, only on the radio. So I did all that for a long time. And well, I don't know, it was a long time. I was young. I was 16 probably. And And at the end of maybe my first year, maybe a little past that, I got called into the boss's office, and I knew it was not going to go well. His name was Bob McLaren. He was a lovely guy. He gave me a break doing this. And he said, you know, you've got the voice to do this. You certainly know a lot about music, he said. And I could tell the way he said it, that wasn't a particularly strong point for him, because he said, you know, you've got all the facts and figures, and I knew how many number one hits the Rolling Stones had had. I knew, you know, all the trivia. He said, people don't care about that. People want to hear about people. They want to get to know you. When you can do that, then you'll be great on the radio. And I have taken that lesson away for everything, whether it is the books that I've written or the radio shows that I do now, my old television show, Pop Life. Those words were paramount for me. People want to hear about people. You just want to hear the stories about people's lives and get to know them. And so hopefully, I think I've done that. His widow wrote me. She told me she heard me tell this story a while ago, and she wrote me and said, I've listened to you for years now. She said I've often thought about your start at CKBW. She said thank you for acknowledging that Bob McLaren, and I will say his name again. Bob McLaren was a part of that, because he was a really decent guy. He gave me a shot, and frankly, I deserved to be fired. I needed to be fired from that job, but. I took the job there as junior announcer 30 years after Donald Sutherland had worked as the junior announcer at that same radio station. And I was many years later, I was in Los Angeles working, and I was interviewing Donald Sutherland, and like a light blew out or something on the set. So we had to sit there and wait while they replaced the light. And we were just making conversation. And I said, hey, I used to work at CKBW, and his face lit up. And he said, wow. How'd you get the job? And I said, well, essentially, I just harassed them until they gave me the job. I just made a nuisance of myself. And he said, that's exactly what I did too. I stood in the parking lot every day, and I talked to the announcers and the news people as they came out. And, eventually after 2 months of doing that, they gave me the job. So me and Donald Sutherland are the.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Especially the part about telling stories, and people want to know you because, I've been hearing over the past, I don't know how long, a lot of former DJs or radio people complain that the advice that they were getting at the sort of tail end of their careers was nobody wants to hear you talk, just play the music.
I mean, I haven't worked for a music station in a very, very, very long time. So I don't know about that, but I do know, that makes me think that the people want to hear about people thing is true, is that when you listen to WTF by Mark Maron, or Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman, or Justin Long's show, or any of these, celebrity interview shows, Smartless, that are all an hour or more long. And there's people telling personal stories and telling stories that maybe they haven't told 100 times before. And I think, that speaks loudly, that speaks volumes about that. And I think, one of the things that makes broadcasting special is when you get to know the people that you're watching on television or on your computer screen or listening on your radio. When you get to know them a little bit, you do feel kind of like they're an acquaintance of yours. And a voice on the radio, if you're having a down day, can be comforting. Stu Jeffries is a great example of that on Boom. He's been kicking around radio forever. He's now, one of the top guys in the country, and he's just personable. People just like to spend a few hours with him and listen to some music. Marilyn Dennis is another one on Chum. She's so great because you want to just see what she has to say. Yeah, hear her tell a story, and that's important.
Strombo's the same sort of thing. I just love to throw Strombo on, 5 to 7 or whatever I think it is at night on Apple Music, and just let it go. And the stories he tells, and again, he promotes a lot of. We were just tweeting about it yesterday. A lot of female fronted and female focused music. He just comes with it.
That's always been George's strength, is being someone who you thought you could talk to. He's just that guy, and it comes through. He's a natural.
Yeah. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the movie Dune, and so here's where I'm going with it. I knew nothing about the story. I asked my son, hey, do you want to see Dune? He goes, yeah, let's take some friends. So it was me and a bunch of grade 10 kids that went to go see Dune. And for me, without Hans Zimmer's music, it's a different movie. That music just took me to that place. It took me to that planet. It took me into the story. It was phenomenal. And I think the music from start to finish, it seemed that the music was always there. Your thoughts on the role that music plays specifically in that movie, and maybe generally the power that it has to really create a story.
Well, I always think that the best music in movies is, and these aren't needle drops. I'm talking about scores now, not pop songs woven into the thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Licorice Pizza, one of my favorite movies of 2021. I mean, unbelievable needle drops in that movie, and so nicely chosen, and just, you know, really good stuff. But what Hans Zimmer does is something different, and I always think that in a score, if you're paying that much attention to the score, then it's not working. Because it should be subliminal. It should be there to support the story, support what's happening around you, and on screen, and not be the focus of the scene. Hans Zimmer scores, for me, generally speaking, do that. I mean, I love his score for The Thin Red Line. It's a war movie. And instead of having, a fast and frenetic kind of score, as you might expect from, a movie about war, it's quiet and introspective. And for me, that worked so well because it blended so nicely with the images that I was seeing on screen that it just became one thing. It melded together so well that it just was one package. And that's what I want. That's what I expect. And generally speaking, that's what he does. Yeah. Dune is a tough one, though, because there's so much story. Yeah. And it has broken the backs of other writers and filmmakers who have tried to bring this to the screen. David Lynch, most notably, tried to give it a go. And while that movie has some, appeal because of the sheer 80s-ness of it and Sting and a codpiece and all that stuff, it doesn't tell the story well. I think Denis Villeneuve tells the story in an interesting way, but manages to keep you in the story, but while giving you information in a way that just isn't people standing around going, all right, so this is what I mean by, this and this. And they don't tell you that much information. You glean it in an interesting way. The music definitely supports that. What I didn't like about the movie was that I sat there, I invested my 2.5 hours in it, and I was just starting to be thinking to myself, wow, I'm in. I'm not a big science fiction guy. I haven't read the book, but I'm in. I think I'm in. And then it just stopped with someone saying, with Zendaya's character saying, well, there's more coming. And that was it. And I thought, do I have to wait 2 years now to see the end of this thing? It was like when they canceled Ray Donovan after the 7th season. There's all these story threads hanging. And then they're like, yeah, by the way, there's not going to be any more Ray Donovan. Now, they have done a movie since then to tie up those ends. But, I thought, man, I don't want to wait 2 years for the rest of this.
Interesting. Speaking of needle drops, James Gunn, it seemed like he must have a record collection and songs he wants to see in movies. The only way my son knows like the hits from the 80s and 90s, like the rock stuff, is from those two movies.
The Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Just great soundtracks. Just great, rock songs on there. But he has outdone himself with Peacemaker.
It's unbelievable.
Now here's the thing. Tell me if I'm wrong here. There is no other TV show because now most of the stuff I watch is streamed. There's no other TV show where I will on purpose not skip the opening.
Oh,
I want to watch that dance scene over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, television shows used to have openings. HR Puffin stuff. And you go back, look that up online. It's 6 minutes long. HR Puffin stuff. Where you go when things get rough. I can still sing the whole song because I watched it so often. And the Partridge Family had like a song, and these shows had little. They were like little short films that introduced the television show every week. And now, if you look at a show like FBI, if you look at The Boys, something like that, which I'm binging right now, there's barely an opening. Just the title comes up and that's it. Yeah. And so Peacemaker sort of counterintuitively, I guess, has an opening, and it's fairly lengthy, but it's a dance number, and it's unbelievable. And the thing that I love about it is that it's unexpected. Certainly the first time you see it, it really knocks your hair back. But you're right. I've watched it. I've watched the 3 or 4 episodes, whatever up there, and I've made sure to watch the opening. But my favorite part is when the eagle lands at the very end of it, and then kind of looks at the camera and then takes another step to get slightly closer to the middle of the frame. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. And the judo master jumps out of the floor. It's fantastic. It's unusual, but fitting for an unusual show. I mean, this is a show that has unbelievable violence next to and sometimes simultaneous with scenes of great emotion, and there's nudity and vulgarity, but you kind of can't bring yourself to hate Peacemaker, even though he's willing to kill men, women, and children in the name of peace. So it's does whatever it takes. It's a wild show with an 80s hair metal soundtrack. The Choir Boys.
Just great
it's
stuff.
7 o'clock and Time for a Party was a song I completely managed to block out of my head, 20 years ago. And now it's an earworm that ever since they used it on that episode is stuck in my head again.
Either that or James Gunn, he owns a piece of some record label that has
that's right.
all of these glam metal albums on it. That's that is fantastic. That's fantastic. I wanted to get years ago, and I don't know where I watched it, but I remember watching this movie, and I thought, in all seriousness, it was a real documentary. And I couldn't for the life of me think, why does this guy look like Garth Brooks so much? But it's not Garth Brooks. It's some rock guy. I said, this is such a great story. And it turns out it's a mockumentary on the alter ego of Garth Brooks.
Yeah, kind of Garth Brooks' rock and roll alter ego.
Yeah, but I enjoyed that movie. And I thought I was getting like the inside scoop on this artist I'd never heard of that had done so well.
I don't know that I've ever seen the movie, but I kind of love Garth Brooks, that he took this weird sidestep and created an alter ego. I mean, some people have written books under pseudonyms just to see if they can make it on the strength of their writing alone and not, a very famous name or whatever it might be. There's been a bunch of that. I think Stephen King did it. It was Richard Bachman. I think he wrote a few books under that name before he was exposed. And then those books ended up doing very well. But I kind of love Garth Brooks, who didn't really, he just wore a wig. He didn't really do all that much to disguise his identity. I don't think.
That's what I'm saying.
I kind of love it. I kind of love that, in country music, which tends to be a little conservative and they don't take big swings like that. I kind of love that he was at that moment the biggest star in country music, and he decided to do something just kind of kooky. And I'm all for the kooky. I wish in music now, I wish there was a bit more kookiness. I wish there was, a few more people that not necessarily sounded like, Meatloaf, but would have larger than life personas and really just put it out there. And maybe I'm just missing it because I'm old now, but I wish there was a bit more of that.
I hear you.
That's funny. Karim's story about watching that and not realizing. My wife tells a story that it was probably late 70s, early 80s. She was babysitting and she watched a movie, and she went home and she said to her parents, I can't believe you never because her parents played tons of music, so many bands. Like, she grew up in a musical household, like listening to music. And she said to her parents, I can't believe that you never introduced me to this band. And they said, well, what band's that? And she said, it's a band called The Ruddles.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
And so where I want to go with that question for you from a mockumentary perspective, and this could be where we go to fisticuffs, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
The Ruddles or Spinal Tap?
Well, listen, they are both great. I think that they're very different, but both absolutely, completely enjoyable. And I think what makes both of them work is that they both have pretty great songs. I mean, the Spinal Tap stuff is certainly built for parody, as is the Vital stuff too. But the songs are kind of legit on both of them, and I like that. And I like that. The Ruddles sort of had some Beatle influence. I think George put some money into it. Maybe, I don't know.
It was handmade films. I think it was handmade
film, right? So, I like all that. I'm not gonna get into a fight about this because I'm not sure which way I would go with it. Both of them are great. If you want to do a sit down, with mockumentaries, pull up those two and then do a double bill of some Jonathan Demme rock docs, and away you go. You've got a perfect weekend right there.
Yeah, I honestly, for me personally, I could never pick between the two because, to your point, the great stories, the parody is hilarious, and the songs, like I can put Cheese and Onions by the Ruddles on. And I got goosebumps. It's a great song. There's
Christmas
so many
with the
amazing.
Devil. I loved how Spinal Tap kind of played out, afterwards. They released a Christmas single, which I have in here somewhere.
Wow.
Called Christmas. It's a picture disc that I have called Christmas with the Devil. And it's fantastic stuff. And I met Michael McKean once and had him sign it. And he said, "I can't believe anybody bought this." I'm like, I know, right? I know.
That's awesome.
So obviously one of the things that many people have been doing over the past couple of years, but especially in 2020, was subscribe to Netflix, Amazon Prime, and here in Canada, Crave, and just all of these streaming platforms and consuming tons of content. My favorite movie from 2020 was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I'd never heard. I thought I was the only one who watched it when it came out. I said, no one knows about this movie, right? Yeah. There was no fanfare, I don't think, about it, but it was a
fairly big deal because it was Chadwick Boseman's last film. It was his last filmed performance, and so there was a fair amount of trumpeting about it online because of that. He had just died weeks previous to that. Unexpectedly, no one knew that he was ill. And then along comes this final performance from him that was staggering. I mean,
the best.
And its fury and wow. Everything else that went into the making of that. And it's a good music movie, but it's tremendous performances all the way through.
Just amazing. I thought he did not win an Academy.
No.
Like that. No. That movie was like, it just blew me away. And I think, we just started binging after that movie, all the Chadwick Boseman movies we could find.
Yeah.
It was like,
he made a career in his early part of his career anyway, of playing real life characters, Jackie Robinson and James Brown.
That's
and
right.
his version of James Brown's life story, it's called Get On Up, is terrific. It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And Viola Davis, just, a treasure, a treasure for sure. Wow. I want to get your thoughts on 8 Mile. I think a lot of people call it one of the best movies, one of the best renditions of real life hip hop. That's out there. What are your thoughts on 8 Mile?
Yeah, I don't know that I really have any. I mean, it is a good movie. I haven't seen it for an age. Brittany Murphy, Eminem, it's one of those films that has, I think, really good performances, particularly Brittany Murphy, I think, is really vulnerable and steely simultaneously, which is really interesting to see an actor pull off and do really well. Eminem, who knew that guy could act, maybe, that was all he had in him, because I don't know that he's made a lot of movies since then.
No, yeah.
But it's a movie, I think, that probably for that moment captured the zeitgeist of what was happening in hip hop, really, really well. But again, I haven't seen it in so long. I'd have to have another look at it.
For sure.
So when Karim mentioned about everybody getting on Netflix, and you mentioned about Amazon Prime, so I realized what I forgot before was the episode that I was talking about, sort of from that 70s time frame, Black London, was Lovers Rock from Small Axe.
Right. Yeah.
Steve McQueen.
Yeah. And I mean, it's part of a trilogy of films, and it's just beautiful looking, unbelievable music. These are I think they're on Amazon. I can't remember.
Yes,
There's so
Amazon
many streaming.
Prime.
It's Amazon Prime. Check them out. Have a look. Again, paints this beautiful picture of a time and place, and does so with a brush that is largely made up of music. That was a clunky metaphor, but there you go.
Oh no, I appreciate that. I wanted to make. I actually texted my wife in the background. Tell me what's the name of that. And then so she said it back, Small Axe, and then I remembered it was Lovers Rock. So one of the questions I like to ask, and I know Karim wants to ask one to finish up, but one of the questions I like to ask is what are you listening to lately? What's in your earbuds that you're checking out, that people should check out?
I've been listening to a weird mix of stuff. I've been listening to, because David Bowie, the patron saint of the House of Crouse over here, would have been 75 years old this month. Yeah. Been listening to a lot of David Bowie, particularly Black Star, which is still a towering,
brilliant.
Brilliant record. And I've been listening to, what else have I been listening to? I've been listening to where's my phone? I'll tell you what I've been listening to. But it's I'm not someone, definitely during the pandemic, I'm not going out and rifling through records in the way that I once would have.
Sure.
Because there's just no opportunity to do that, and I'm not sure that I've got the time to do it anyway. But I have been trying to educate myself and learn about Sparks. When I was a much younger person, I had Come On in My House and a few of those records, and went off them, forgot about them for a while. But then I watched the recent Edgar Wright documentary called The Sparks Brothers, and ended up kind of digging it and sort of like thinking about that music again. So there's that. I've been listening to, what else have I been listening to? There's all kinds of weird stuff on my Danzig Mother I listened to recently, Put a Straw Under Baby by Brian Eno.
Wow.
So Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk. I'm trying to train my ear to become sophisticated enough to listen to Thelonious Monk. I listened to Pomps and Pride by Toots and the Maytals today. So so I'm just I'm again kind of all over the map. I tell people I grew up in this tiny little town, and the only movie theater in that town just showed whatever movies they could get. And so I would go to the Saturday afternoon matinee, and it might be Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, except that it's July. But that's the only movie they could get, and so they would play it. So I would watch that, and then I go back for Saturday night, and it could be Saturday Night Fever if they could get a print of that, because that would be current for the time I was living there. Or it might be Tarkovsky's Stalker, a weird Russian science fiction movie, because that's what they could get that week. And I tell you all of that because what it meant is that I don't really think in terms of genre and that kind of thing. A movie is a movie to me. If it's Stalker or Solaris, something like that, or if it's Saturday Night Fever, they're all pretty much the same to me. I'll sit through them. In terms of what I'm listening to, Thelonious Monk and David Bowie seem to sit pretty well together to my ear. So, nice. I listen to lots of stuff in a variety of different ways.
That's awesome. I just, before I throw it back over to Karim, I had the chance to see Toots, what was it, about 4 years ago at the Danforth. Were you there at that show?
I was not. I would have loved to have seen that. Yeah.
It was again, goosebumps. Phenomenal show.
All right. I've got some rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay.
And you could answer them quickly, or you could spend time explaining. I'll leave that up to you.
Okay.
So, first movie you ever remember watching?
The first movie that I remember made a huge impression on me was The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. And the reason that it made a huge, and I haven't seen it since. And so maybe this scene does not exist in the movie, but in my mind's eye, it does. One of the characters gets shot. And the camera is on his face. You hear the gunshot. He goes like this, and he gets shot a little bit. He gets knocked back. The camera goes down and shoots the rest of the scene through the hole in his chest that the bullet made. And I remember thinking as a kid, that's pretty cool. And it probably wasn't the first movie I saw in a theater, but it's the first one that made me love movies.
First one you remember, absolutely. Your favorite movie?
Oh, that's a tough one, and could be a different thing any day. I mean, I'll watch Pulp Fiction anytime because every time I see a little bit of Pulp Fiction, I always think to myself, well, I'll just watch until, the whatever scene, until the GIMP scene. And then I can't, I end up watching the entire thing because it makes me think about the weekend that movie opened. I went to see it at the Varsity over here. I lined up, I got a ticket. Everyone was talking about it. It's pre-internet. Nobody had seen anything. You hadn't heard that much. You just heard like, this is going to be something special. And the movie was running late because people weren't leaving. They were applauding afterwards, and then they were talking to one another about it. So I get into a screening. I sit there for the 2 hours plus that the movie takes. And then as soon as it ended, I ran out of there while everyone else is applauding and talking to one another, bought another ticket at the box office and got in line and went right back in. And that movie, I think of that every time I think of that. I think of hitchhiking years ago when I lived in a place called Liverpool, Nova Scotia. Halifax was 200 miles away, probably more. And it was hard to get to. And I was a kid when the movie Tommy came out, and I was determined that I was going to go see Tommy. So it wasn't obviously ever going to play in Liverpool or not for a long time. And so I hitchhiked. Played hooky from school, hitchhiked to Halifax, which took hours, went to Tommy, saw it 3 times in a row, hitchhiked home, got home really late at night, got grounded for the rest of my life for a year or something, but it was worth it, So those are movies that pop into my head when I think of movies that I've sort of taken extreme measures to see.
Wow. Awesome. So I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but the movie that you can never get your time back.
There's a movie called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. And it's, it was not a particularly popular movie, but it's a real kind of like frat boy film based on a book that was an inexplicable bestseller for a minute. And I can't remember the guy's name, but it made him popular for seconds. And they made a movie out of it. And I just really hated it. And I've mostly blocked it out of my head, except that I remember I was reviewing it on CTV and I just tore it a new one. And then we assigned a star rating for it. And I gave it -infinity times 10. That's the worst rating I've ever given a movie.
Wow.
That was Tucker Max.
That was Tucker Max. That's right.
Tucker
Max,
who was the first, sort of very early internet, I will help you sleep with as many women as you want to kind of persona.
Snake oil unapologetic about it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. The last movie you saw in a theater. Now, I preface it with this, that you probably have access to theaters that Gregg and I might not. You probably get to go in when no one's there so you can social distance. But I guess the last movie you properly saw in a theater
was The Matrix Resurrections. And that was with an audience at an IMAX screening. Keanu was there. And the movie is terrible, but it was, but it was exciting to be there in the moment. The studio had taken over. It was at the Scotiabank Theatre in Toronto, and there's 14 screens. They had taken over all 14 screens for this to show that movie that night. And I was lucky. I got to go to the big theater, see it on IMAX, and it was an event. It was sure. Kind of a cool. Now, most of the movies that I've seen over the last 2 years since the pandemic have been at press screenings where, there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 of us in a theater that seats 300 or 400 people. So you wouldn't even know that there's anyone else in the room with you.
Yeah. What's the one movie we should see this weekend? It could be streaming, it could be in the theaters, but what's the one movie we should see this weekend?
There's really nothing that's new this weekend.
Sure.
I think that I think that just the idea of theaters being closed and the weather's crappy, and that has made for a fairly miserable January so far in terms of stuff. But this Polystyrene, I Am a Cliche documentary that opens next week is fantastic. If you haven't seen Licorice Pizza yet, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie about a mostly platonic relationship between a young boy, 14, 15 years old, and a young woman who's a little bit older, is fantastic. Alana Haim is the star who's getting a lot of buzz for that, and she stars opposite Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, Connor Hoffman.
Wow.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's really good, and it will make you feel better on the way out than you felt on the way in.
Licorice Pizza. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
It's the
definitely
name
look
of
at that.
it's a weird title, but it's named after a chain of record stores in Los Angeles in the 70s. So imagine a pizza, kind of looks like a record made of licorice.
That is awesome. Richard, thank you so much for your time. It is so much
Yes.
appreciated. To tell us what's going on next in your world. Where can people go to listen to you, to watch you, to sort of consume more Richard Crouse?
Well, my website's a good place to start, richardcrouse.ca. My podcast, Last Call with Richard Crouse, is on Apple and Spotify and all the places that you find podcasts. And it's a look, because now we can't really go to bars to have a drink. I take you to great bars around the world and tell you stories about the Frolic Room, the last great dive bar on Hollywood Boulevard, or Harry's New York bar in Paris, where they invented the Bloody Mary, or the Tonga Room in San Francisco, which is one of the world's great tiki bars, where Anthony Bourdain walked in and said, "If you hate this place, you probably also hate kittens." So... So you can find that, wherever you find it. And then on CTV and CP24, all the kind of usual places I've been popping up for years.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.